I think I've reached a certain vintage, a certain age. And so these things happen. But I feel tremendously honored. I love Fantasia. I've been going to this festival since the late 90s. It's one of my favorite festivals in one of my favorite cities. And to receive any kind of award here is a deeply profound honor as far as I'm concerned. I'm really obsessed with this idea of the importance of being weird in our current day and age, because the algorithmic approach to filmmaking is just, I think it's flattening everything. The way these streaming companies and so on use algorithms to determine what people like, which seems to be based on the presumption that the consumer is always right. But I don't think the consumer is always right. I don't think the consumer knows what they want. In fact, none of us do. That's why we have art, is to, blaze trails in new directions. And I feel like a place like Fantasia is a platform for really original voices and for weird stuff. And I think as a culture, as a global culture, we need more weird. It's funny. First of all, when you make a movie, it is like having a child. And so once the movie's done, it starts to have a life of its own. And some of my movies have gone on to a long life. Some of them have sort of disappeared. Some of them disappear and come back. But Cube is one that has probably the most resilient life. And it makes me happy. As a proud parent, that makes me very, very happy. And to come back and have the opportunity to restore it, to go back into the original print and clean it up and just polish it up, make it presentable for the 21st century, felt really, really great. And made me very nostalgic for that time, because as difficult as it was making that film, I really loved the people that I made it with. And, one of whom, Wayne Robson, who's an actor in the film, is not with us anymore. So it's very meaningful. It was kind of a profound experience going back and working on the film again. We used an IP print. So we couldn't afford to go to the original negative, unfortunately. Although I say that with an asterisk, because I find some of the transfers from original negatives to be too crisp. And we got an excellent print, and it just feels like film. It's very sharp, but it's not so sharp that it feels electronic. And so I'm really happy with the transfer. And also we restored the soundtrack, and it sounds amazing. So I really stand by this version of it. I think it's very true to the original version. I didn't do much in the way of George Lucasing scenes, adding stuff or anything like that. But I did manage to sweeten the image with an electronic grade, which was something that was not available to me when we made the film. It was a photochemical grade. And so I could go in and just add more contrast to some of the shots and areas in the shots and just enhance what was there. And I did it with the original cinematographer, Derek Rogers. So yeah, it was great. I storyboard everything. And, I do a fair amount of television work, and I storyboard all of my TV work, which is something I never thought I would have time to do, but I've sort of learned how to do it quickly. And probably to a fault, but I like having a plan. I don't feel comfortable showing up on set without a plan. But part of the art of storyboarding and working with storyboards is knowing when to throw the storyboards away, to understand that it is only a plan, and to be flexible enough as a filmmaker that you can step away from your original plan and incorporate what's right in front of you. But I found that storyboards have actually become a way to make me more flexible than I think I would be if I didn't know what I was going to do walking on the set. And everyone has their own way, but for me, I love it. I like being able to sit in a room with a script alone, with no one else, and then just start to draw the movie. It's like I'm the first person getting to see the movie, and that's very exciting. From a very early age, I've been interested in science fiction, and I couldn't tell you why. But maybe we all are to some degree, because that's the world we've been born into, is a very technologically evolved world. Even somebody like me who was born in 1969, but which happened to be the year of the moon landing, an old guy like me. Actually, what's really fascinating for an old guy like me is to see things that were only science fiction concepts become real. And the emergence of AI it's interesting to see how life is both imitating and diverging from the fantasy that I grew up reading and watching as a kid. And it's obvious that AI is going to have this very profound effect on our lives in the future of the planet. And I don't think anybody knows what that's going to be. I find it endlessly fascinating. I find it terrifying, and I find it exciting, and I really don't know what to make of it yet. And I think it's going to have a big impact on my business, on filmmaking. My new film, if it gets made, deals with it, and I find it endlessly fascinating. The script literally went out yesterday. We'll see if there's interest in it, but I hope there's interest, because I feel like if I don't make it, somebody else will. It's the first time I've done anything that's like very topical, and it's obviously part of the zeitgeist. But yes, I think it's multifaceted. It's the same reason that Splice was really interesting to me, which is my movie that dealt with genetic engineering. There's so much wrapped up in what that science is. There's so many areas that you could explore as a filmmaker. It's very multi-layered and endlessly fascinating subject. David Hewlett is my muse, sometimes alter ego. I've been working with him since I was 15. So, since we were teenagers, we've been making films together. And David is a great actor, but so much more than an actor. He's a very, really brilliant guy, and multi-talented and faceted, and a lovely human being, very close friend. And to me, one of the great pleasures of making movies is to be able to work with your friends, because it's a collaborative medium. And David works so hard and is so devoted to what I do and to the art and craft of acting as well. It's really a pleasure having him. Like, if you talk to anybody who's worked with him, people love having David on the set. He just brings this incredible energy. So I've been lucky to have him in virtually all of my movies, minus one or two, and we'll continue probably until one of us is dead, which may not be long from now, but. Yes, I wrote and illustrated my first, possibly last, graphic novel. Hopefully not last, because I really enjoyed doing it. And it was a dream that I've had since I was a little kid, because my first love was comics, and I've always liked to draw. And actually, speaking of technology, it was really with the emergence of the iPad Pro, which was the first tablet where you could actually draw on the screen, that I realized maybe I could do a comic, because I could do everything on that device. I could write it, I could illustrate it, I could ink it, I could paint it, I could lay it out, do all the lettering, everything myself. And so one day I just went, you know what, I'm going to start. And that was over 5 years ago. And in between film and TV projects, when I had some downtime, I would work on it. And eventually the pandemic came along, and all of a sudden I had a lot of time on my hands. And so that's really how I managed to finish it. And I loved it, because in contrast to making movies, I didn't have to get permission to do it. And the story of tech did begin as an idea for a movie, but I quickly realized this will not get made anytime soon, because it's expensive and it's not based on anything. And, just to work at that level in Hollywood you need to either have a certain cachet as a filmmaker, or you need a property that has a certain cachet. And I had neither. So I went, what if I did that as a comic book? So although it began as a movie, I really wrote it as a comic book, and to be nothing more than a comic book, which has its own, that medium, although related to film, has its own way of expressing itself. So I hope I've succeeded in doing that. But I loved it. Yeah, it was so much fun. I will be putting out an album at the end of this week. I'm not a musician. I would never pretend to be a musician. I don't even really remember how I did it. Which is, none of this is particularly a great way to promote it. But I also made it on my iPad using GarageBand. And possibly because I'm not a musician, it was tremendously exciting to create music. I was really like a monkey with finger paint and smearing the paint on the wall. And I would get just such a visceral thrill from that, partly because of the power of the technology, where you literally have an orchestra at your fingertips. Like with a stroke of my finger, I can get an orchestral chord. And it sounds pretty close to the real thing. And while I'm not a musician, I do know how to edit. And I think there is a kind of synergy between different mediums. Music and film are both time-based. And you start to realize that, okay, I've never written a song before, but I kind of understand this. And I've listened to music my whole life, of course, and I love music. And I sort of understand certain underlying structures. And so I think if there's any value in that album, it's that you're listening to something made by somebody who's discovering the form. And there is a kind of thrill in that. And I feel like in not knowing, sometimes something really original will come out of it. Whereas in my medium of choice and what I've studied my whole life to do, film, I have a lot of preconceptions of what it should be or how things should be done. And that's great and that's good, but sometimes that can be limiting. And whereas with music, I don't have any knowledge. And I actually think sometimes that results in something quite interesting. I hope what I did was interesting. I don't know if it is. But it does, as you said, it does deal with technology and humanity. That wasn't my intent. I didn't have any intention when I was doing it. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just messing around. But then things started to coalesce. And I did kind of, at some point, somewhat become conscious of that. And that there is a wonderful dialectic between electronic sounds and organic sounds. One highlights the other. And so in the electronic realm, I was sort of looking for something that was very human, and vice versa. My first camera was a Sankyo 40XL Super 8 camera. I remember it well, and I got it for my 11th birthday. Maybe it was my 11th birthday. Maybe, I can't remember if it was a Christmas present or a birthday present. Anyway, because my birthday is close to Christmas. But yes, it was wonderful. I love Super 8. I loved working in that medium. And although it was kind of expensive, especially when you're a kid, but I really liked that camera. And I later worked with a Canon. I think Sankyo, I could be wrong. I feel like Sankyo and Canon were related. Anyway, but yeah, it was a wonderful, Super 8's a beautiful medium. To begin with, my real interest early on, I was sort of more interested in animation. And Ray Harryhausen, the great animator, was sort of my hero. I wanted to be like a Ray Harryhausen. So they were more, very basic little animations like giant monsters eating people, that kind of thing. It was only later that I started to become interested in film as a storytelling medium. But I would have very happily become a visual effects artist or an animator. That really fascinated me. And Super 8 was great, because my camera could shoot single frame by frame. So I did a lot of clay animation, that kind of stuff. I think we all love stories. So I don't think, I don't think I'm a particularly good storyteller, to be honest. I know people are certainly much better raconteurs than I am. But I did, I had a wonderful gift as a child. My dad read to me, and he read everything. He read Dickens to me. He read The Hobbit and the entire of The Lord of the Rings, all of the Chronicles of Narnia, because he didn't have a TV or anything. He lived in the woods. And so I think a lot of whatever storytelling ability I have, a lot of it just came from absorbing all this amazing literature. And he was a very good reader at a very young age. And that kind of instilled a certain love for me and for great storytelling. Shortly after I made Splice, I found out that the producers who had the rights to William Gibson's book Neuromancer, which is a very esteemed science fiction novel that won maybe even the first book to win the triple prize of the Hugo, Nebula, and Philip K. Dick Award. I think that's right. I hope that's right. But a very esteemed science fiction novel that was kind of the father of cyberpunk. I happened to find out that the producers were looking for a director, and one of them was Canadian, and there was an incentive to get a Canadian director, and I'm Canadian. So I immediately threw my hat in the ring, and I managed to convince them to let me do Neuromancer. And it's a notoriously difficult book to adapt, but I felt like I knew my way in, and in a fairly short period of time wrote a script that everyone really liked. So it was great. And I was excited to enter that world. If you ever read anything by William Gibson, one of the exciting aspects of his books is that they don't introduce you to the world. They just drop you into it. You are literally, as a reader, you're not given a guidebook. You're not given an explanation. You're just placed in a world, and you have to catch up. And so there's a sense of authenticity to the worlds that he creates. A lot of the things that he's anticipated, including the internet and cyberspace, which is a term he coined, have come into fruition. So I had this I was very excited to kind of portray that world on screen, because I didn't think anybody had really succeeded in doing it. And I got some amazing designers involved, one of whom, and who would have been the lead designer, is a great manga artist, Tsutomu Nihei, who did a bunch of designs for me. And it was fabulous. It was just great. The problem with Neuromancer was it was expensive, and it's cyberpunk, and it's a little bit dark, and it really needed to be a studio movie. And then also The Matrix, the Wachowski brothers movie, had taken a lot from the book, including the word matrix. So although I think the Wachowski movie is more like a Philip K. Dick book, to be honest, I didn't think that was a problem at all. But the studios did, in particular Warner Brothers. So I had Joel Silver involved, but he was at Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers didn't want to do it. And then I had Lorenzo de Buenaventura involved, but he was at Paramount, and he couldn't convince them to do it. So it just, unfortunately, there wasn't a way to approach that movie in a mainstream way. And then we tried to do it, to finance it independently, and I just think it was too big. It just, especially at that time, for that marketplace, it wasn't possible. So after a long stretch, I eventually had to let it go. But it is going to be made it is being made at Apple as a series. So I'm excited to see what they do.
Well, I hope you'll be able one day to do your own version.
Oh, thank you. Well, I did get to adapt The Peripheral, which was a more recent novel by William Gibson for Amazon. So, one thing led into the other. So I feel like I was able to dip my toes into that world, and it was a great experience. Oh, thank you so much. Lovely. Oh, such a pleasure. Merci encore.